I woke to rain tapping against carved wooden shutters, and someone shouting that the first academy bell had already rung. For several confused seconds, I stared at the ceiling above my narrow bed. The ceiling was painted with 9 faded mana symbols. A crack shaped like a crooked river ran from the blue symbol to the wall. Beneath the window sat a travel chest covered in my mother's old red cloth. My trial robes hung from a peg beside it, stiff, new, and one size too large. I knew this room. I also knew it had been demolished 8 years ago. My name was Serwaa. I was 18 years old, and I had returned to the morning of my first trial at Acure Academy. In my first life, that morning had begun with rain. It had ended with me choosing Sunspear magic because everyone said talented students belonged in prestigious fields. I had forced bright mana through channels that were never suited for it, torn those channels during my second year, and spent the next decade pretending the pain in my hands was normal. My closest friend, Nsia Dappa, had lasted only 3 months. She had failed an academy examination on a platform that was supposedly fair, stable, and randomly assigned. Her river spell had collapsed without warning. The examiners accused her of poor control. She had been expelled, returned to her village in shame, and never cast magic publicly again. 10 years later, after my damaged channels had ended my career, I had been working as a records assistant in the sacred market when scholars made a discovery that embarrassed half the magical world. Cowrie readers had never been predicting fate. The shells were responding to tiny changes in nearby mana probability before those changes became visible. For centuries, people had laughed at market aunties who tossed cowries before journeys, harvests, marriages, and business agreements. Then academy researchers proved those aunties had been measuring real variations in mana flow with greater sensitivity than most expensive instruments. By then, Nsia was gone from my life. My hands shook whenever I tried to cast, and Acure Academy had already replaced its entire trial hall after discovering cracks in the old Riverstone foundations. I sat up so quickly that the room tilted. The first bell rang again. I had less than an hour before the selection trial. Someone hammered on my door. "Amma," a girl called from the corridor, "are you alive?" I opened it and found my dormitory neighbor, Efua, holding a half-eaten honey roll. "You look terrible," she said. "Thank you." "You're welcome. The Sun Courtyard candidates are already gathering." In my first life, those words had filled me with excitement. Now they made the mana channels in my palms ache with remembered pain. Efua looked at the golden cord around my trial robes. "You are still choosing Sunspear magic, aren't you? Your entrance scores were high enough." I glanced at the rain sliding down the window. 10 years of regret had taught me that being capable of entering a path did not mean the path was capable of carrying me. "No," I said. Efua stopped chewing. "I'm choosing Cowrie Divination." Her honey roll slipped out of her fingers. Fortunately, I caught it before it reached the floor. That was the first successful prediction of my second life. The academy selection hall smelled of wet robes, lamp oil, polished wood, and several hundred nervous students pretending they were not nervous. 9 doors stood along the curved back wall. The largest door was plated in gold and marked with the symbol of the sun spear. Students in bright robes crowded before it, while instructors called names from long scrolls. The river magic door was made from blue glass. The hunter door was carved with antlers and paw prints. There were doors for healing, formation craft, spirit gardening, enchantment, defensive wards, and wind navigation. The Cowrie door was half hidden behind a column. Its sign was crooked. I had never noticed that in my first life. I had barely noticed the door at all. An instructor stood on the central platform and raised both hands. Mana spread through the hall, carrying his voice without forcing him to shout. "Candidates, your first trial will test affinity, control, and judgment. You may request any field, but the academy will not guarantee placement if your mana structure is unsuitable." The Sunspear candidates straightened proudly. I I remembered doing the same. When my name was called, I walked to the registration table. Master Abojai sat behind it. He was younger than I remembered, though he already wore the same permanently tired expression. "I'm a Serwaa," he read. "High marks in projection, mathematics, spell structure, and heat resistance. Recommended field, Sunspear magic." "Cowrie Divination," I said. He looked up. Behind me, someone coughed to hide a laugh. Master Abojai checked the scroll again. "You qualify for the Sun Courtyard." "I know." Cowrie study is generally chosen by students with low projection capacity. My projection is not low. That is what makes this confusing. A boy in golden robes leaned toward his friend and whispered loudly, "Perhaps she wants to tell fortunes at weddings." I recognized him as Ya Osai. In my first life, Ya had been the best student in our Sunspear class. He had never been deliberately cruel. He simply possessed the relaxed confidence of someone who had never considered that the academy might value the wrong things. Master Abojai lowered his voice. "Cowrie work is a minor support discipline. Market assessment, travel timing, simple risk readings, you may find it limiting." "In 10 years," I almost said, "your research department will argue over who deserves credit for rediscovering it." Instead, I smiled. I would still like to choose it. He studied me for another moment, then pressed a wooden token into my hand. A small white shell had been painted on its surface. "East Annex," he said. "Second floor, room 12. Ya gave me a look that was almost sympathetic. That was worse than the laughter. I left the crowded hall and crossed the academy grounds beneath a borrowed umbrella. Rain silvered the stone paths. Small warming charms glowed beneath the covered walkways. Students hurried toward grand towers while I followed signs that became progressively smaller and less confident. The East Annex stood beside the old herb garden. Room 12 had 6 desks, 4 buckets catching leaks, and a sleepy brown lizard warming itself on the instructor's lamp. An older woman sat at the front, drinking tea from a chipped green cup. She wore a blue wrap, a plain cream robe, and enough brass bracelets to announce every movement. "You are early," she said. I thought I was late. For the important things, those are sometimes the same. She pointed to a chair. "I am Madam Essie Badu. What did you do wrong to be sent here?" "I asked to come." Her eyebrows rose. There were only 7 other students in the room. Every one of them turned to stare. Madame Badu set down her tea. "Well," she said, "that is either promising or extremely foolish. We shall find out which." She placed 4 cowries on the desk. 3 landed, with their openings facing upward. The 4th spun twice, hesitated, and leaned toward the eastern wall. A heartbeat later, water dripped from the ceiling into the empty chair beneath it. Everyone looked at the leak. I looked at the shell. It had moved before the drop fell. Madame Badu noticed where I was looking. For one quiet second, her tired eyes became very sharp. Then she smiled. "Perhaps," she said, "we shall find out sooner than expected." Cowrie Divination had 3 official academy uses. We could advise gardeners when to transplant delicate herbs. We could warn travelers about unstable weather mana. We could also sit politely in sacred markets while merchants ignored our advice and blamed us afterward. According to Ya, this made us professional worriers with shells. According to Madame Badu, Sunspear students were professional lampposts with opinions. I liked her immediately. My first Cowrie lesson was less impressive. Madame Badu gave each of us 4 shells and told us to identify which of 6 covered cups contained a warm ember charm. I remembered the future theory. Cowries did not show fixed outcomes. Their internal mana spirals responded to nearby possibilities. Unfortunately, remembering a theory and using it were different skills. My shells indicated the 3rd cup. The ember was under the 5th. On my next attempt, the shells pointed toward the window. "There is no cup by the window," I said. "No," Madame Badu agreed. A loose shutter swung inward and knocked over the third cup. The class laughed. I wrote the result in my notebook. Madame Badu leaned over my shoulder. Most students recorded only whether their answers were correct. I had drawn the shell's positions, the direction of the nearest mana current, the timing of the shutter, and the number of breaths between my casting and the result. "You are measuring the wrong answer," she said. "I think it may have answered a different question." Her bracelets went still. "What question?" "I'm not sure yet." "Good." That afternoon, I found Enjo in the cafeteria. She sat alone near the steamed windows, stirring groundnut soup she had not eaten. She was small, quiet, and wrapped in blue Rivertrack robes. Her braids were tied with pale glass beads that clicked when she moved. In my first life, we had met 2 weeks later after I found her crying behind the laundry house. This time, I carried my tray to her table. "May I sit here?" She looked startled. "There are many empty tables." "Yes, but none of them have you." That sounded smoother in my head. Enja blinked. Then she shifted her books aside. We ate sweet bread and soup while rain murmured against the windows. She answered questions in short sentences. Her river affinity was unusually strong, but her mana stopped flowing whenever people watched her cast. "I forget how to breathe," she admitted. "That seems inconvenient." Her mouth twitched. Before we finished eating, someone dropped onto the bench opposite us. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing the green-brown robes of the hunter track. A bundle of practice arrows rested against his chair. "Which of you is the Cowrie girl?" he asked. Enja immediately looked at me. Subtlety was not her strongest magic. "I am." The boy placed 3 cracked arrowheads on the table. "My name is Kojo Antwi. My instructor says I have the worst luck he has seen in 11 years. Congratulations." I missed 6 moving targets this morning. Every bowstring loosened. Every practice charm triggered late. Then a pigeon attacked me. The pigeon may be unrelated. It waited outside the dining hall. That sounds personal. Enja covered a laugh with her cup. Kojo leaned closer. "Can your shells tell me who cursed me?" "No." His face fell. "They might tell me whether you are cursed at all." He glanced at the small pouch at my belt. "How much?" "1 meat pie." "You charge food." "I am building a traditional practice." He returned with 2. We moved to an empty courtyard after lunch. I asked him to shoot at 5 floating straw discs while I cast 4 cowries onto my mat. The shells did not point toward Kojo. They shifted toward his bow, then repeatedly formed a narrow line just before each target charm changed direction. "Again," I said. He fired. The target moved half a breath before his arrow arrived. Again. The same thing happened. Kojo lowered his bow. "Bad luck." "No, bad timing." "My timing is excellent." "Your timing is excellent for targets that move when the instructor says they will." Enja crouched beside the shells. "But the charms are drawing mana from the courtyard current. The rain is slowing them." Kojo stared at her. She immediately looked down. I smiled. "My Cowries notice the shift. Enjo understands the current. You know the targets." Kojo lifted his bow again. This time, he waited 1 extra breath. His arrow struck the center. He hit the next 4 as well. For the first time that day, the shells in my hand felt warm. Not powerful. Not yet. But useful. That was better. For the next 5 weeks, I practiced the least dramatic magic at Akir Academy. Sunspear students burned holes through bronze plates. River students raised glittering arches of water over the practice yard. Hunter students raced enchanted wooden beasts between the trees. I tossed shells beside herb pots. There is no dignified way to describe losing an argument to a flower pot, but I managed it repeatedly. Every morning, I arranged 6 pots along the East Annex windows. I measured soil moisture, sunlight, room temperature, and surrounding mana. Then I cast 4 cowries to determine which pot was most likely to dry first. During the first week, I was correct 9 times out of 28. Madame Badu called this a brave attack on the laws of chance. During the second week, I stopped asking which pot would dry first. Instead, I focused on what the shells could actually sense. Which pot had the greatest change in mana absorption? Which root charm was most likely to weaken within 10 minutes? Which window current was shifting? My results improved. 4 shells could sense immediate changes, but they confused causes easily. 8 shells gave more detail but responded to my expectations. 12 produced beautiful patterns that meant absolutely nothing when I was tired. The shells are mirrors as much as windows, Madame Badu explained one evening. The farther you try to look, the more of yourself you see. I began recording my mood before every reading. Hungry readings leaned toward food. Anxious readings warned of disasters that never happened. Overconfident readings were especially creative. Nsia helped me by bringing cups of water from different academy fountains. River mana held recent movement better than air, giving my Cowries clearer patterns. In return, I helped her practice casting while being observed. At first, she could barely lift a ribbon of water if Kojo and I watched. So I sat behind her, then beside her, then in front of her while pretending to read. Then Kojo joined us and loudly complained about mosquitoes until she forgot to be nervous. Her water ribbon rose smoothly between 3 practice stones. Kojo gave her a solemn nod. I frightened the spell into cooperating. You nearly frightened me into throwing it at you, Nsia said. It was the longest sentence she had spoken in public. Kojo looked delighted. His own training improved once he stopped blamming luck. We discovered that he sensed mana changes through sound. His arrows struck best when he listened to the hum of target charms instead of watching their light. He had spent years being told that hunters trusted their eyes. His ears were better. Once a week, we visited the 7 Bells market for supplies. The market spread beneath colorful awnings beside the Academy River. Protective charms jingled over every entrance. Spice sellers argued beside rune carvers. River priests sold small clay lamps. Spirit birds stole fruit whenever the ward keepers looked away. Madame Badu sent us to Auntie Akasua's stall, where second-hand magical tools were stacked in careful towers. I bought a worn velvet casting mat, a brass measuring ring, and 36 mismatched cowries. Academy students always want matching shells, Auntie Akasua said. Matching shells look pretty. Different shells teach you to pay attention. One cowrie was chipped. Another had a pale blue spiral. A third refused to lie flat. I learned each shell's weight and mana response. At night, the 3 of us studied in an old library corner where the lamps gave off soft amber light. Nsia copied formation diagrams. Kojo pretended not to enjoy research while eating most of our sesame cakes. By the end of the 5th week, I had completed 612 recorded casts. I could sense a kettle moments before it boiled over. I could identify which classroom warming rune would fail next. I once warned Kojo not to sit on a bench because the shells showed a sudden downward probability. He ignored me. The bench collapsed. He sat on the floor for a while, looking thoughtful. Do not say anything, he told me. I predicted you would say that. It was not true, but it was worth 1 meat pie. The first serious problem appeared during Nsia's midterm practical. River track students had to guide 3 floating seed bowls across a circular exam platform without spilling the water inside them. It was considered a basic control test. In my first life, this had been the examination that destroyed her confidence. I stood behind the viewing rail with Kojo, my hands wrapped around my carry pouch. Nsia stepped onto platform 7. The platform was made from blue-gray river stone. Thin silver formation lines ran through it, connecting 9 carved nodes around the edge. Master Abojai inspected the structure and raised his flag. Begin. Nsia breathed exactly as we had practiced. Water rose from the basin. The first seed bowl floated forward. The second followed. Her control was steady. Then every shell in my pouch clicked at once. I pulled them out and cast 4 onto the wooden rail. All 4 landed on their backs. A closed pattern. Interruption. "Stop," I said. No one heard me. The formation beneath Nsia pulsed. Her water ribbon twisted sideways. One seed bowl struck the floor. The second spun off the platform. The third burst upward in a spray that soaked 2 examiners. Nsia froze. The water collapsed. Master Aboje lowered his flag. Mage Dappa, loss of control at the second sequence. Score, 31. My stomach went cold. It was happening again. Nsia stepped down with water dripping from her sleeves. "I did everything right," she whispered. "I know." A river instructor approached. "Your spell structure was acceptable, but you allowed panic to break your concentration." I wasn't panicking. The instructor's expression softened in the way adults. Expressions soften when they have already decided not to believe you. "Then you must learn to recognize panic earlier." Kojo's jaw tightened. I looked at the platform. A second student began the test. His water spell survived, but the third bowl wobbled at exactly the same point. A third student lost control 1 breath earlier. The examiners blamed technique. The students blamed nerves. My Cowries leaned toward the floor. After the test, Nsia received a formal warning. If she scored below 40 in the Public Academy Challenge at the end of term, she would be removed from the river track. Not expelled from the academy yet, but I knew how the path unfolded. A transfer to general studies. Loss of her scholarship. A letter home. Then a quiet departure before the winter rains. We took her to the cafeteria and bought fried plantain even though none of us was hungry. "I can practice more," she said. "You already practice more than anyone," Kojo replied. "Then I will practice differently." "You did not fail," I said. "The score says I did." "The score is measuring the wrong thing." Nsia stared at the untouched food on her plate. I cast 4 shells between the cups. They formed the same closed pattern. Kojo leaned closer. "What does that mean?" Something interrupted the mana. The examiner said the formation was stable. The examiner also said you were unlucky. That is a fair point. That evening, I visited Madame Badu. She was repairing a torn casting mat with blue thread. A pot of ginger tea steamed beside her. I explained the exam, the pulse, and the repeated shell pattern. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she opened a cabinet and removed a stack of old records bound with faded cord. "Platform 7, she said. "Students have complained about it for years. Why hasn't anyone investigated?" "They have. Formation mages inspected the visible runes. River instructors tested the water channels. The platform passed every standard measurement. Then the measurements are too slow." Madame Badu poured me tea. I looked at the records. The failures appeared random. Different students. Different spells. Different weather. But I remembered the future discovery. Cowries detected probability shifts before mana changes became strong enough for standard instruments. "What if the platform is stable most of the time?" I asked. "What if it fails only for a fraction of a breath?" Madame Badu's bracelets chimed softly as she folded her hands. "Then," she said, "we have spent years asking a stone whether it is broken when we should have asked when it breaks." We began our investigation with permission from nobody. This was not rebellion. It was after-class research conducted near academy property with tools we happened to be carrying. Madame Badu said this distinction was important. Platform 7 stood in the old trial courtyard beside the river. The public challenge would use all 12 platforms in 9 days. We arrived after sunset with lanterns, notebooks, Nsia's water bowl, Kojo's practice bow, and my 36 mismatched cowries. The first hour revealed nothing. The formation glowed evenly. Nsia sent water through every channel without difficulty. Kojo shot blunt arrows across the platform to test vibration. I cast shells until my fingers cramped. Every reading showed stability. At least we have proven it works perfectly when no examination is happening, Kojo said. Nsia sat on the edge of the platform. During the test, there were 6 active platforms. I looked toward the others. Not one. We activated Platform 6 using borrowed practice stones. Then Platform 8. The Academy bell marked the hour. My cowries shifted. Not strongly, but enough. We activated Platform 9. The pale blue shell rolled toward Platform 7's northern edge. Nsia placed her palm against the stone. There is a current underneath, she said, very faint. All platforms share the old river formation, Kojo said. The visible runes are separate, but the foundation lines connect them. We needed more mana. Kojo persuaded 4 hunter students to practice nearby by claiming the courtyard had better target lighting. Nsia invited 2 river students. Madame Badu brought the entire Cowrie class, though 3 of them believed we were meeting for tea. Once 8 platforms were active, I cast 12 shells inside the brass measuring ring. The pattern tightened. Every 13 breaths, the blue shell trembled. Every 39 breaths, 3 shells turned. Every 78 breaths, the entire formation leaned north. There, I whispered. Nsia sent a thread of water into the narrow seam beside the northern node. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the water vanished into the stone. Kojo knelt and pressed his ear against the floor. I hear clicking. A formation should hum. It should not click. We repeated the test the next night. Then again in the rain. We made mistakes. Once Kojo activated the wrong target charm and launched 6 padded arrows into a laundry cart. Once I misread a pattern and made everyone stand silently for 12 minutes while nothing happened. Once Nsia pushed too much water into the seam and a small river spirit emerged, stole Madame Badu's spoon, and refused to return it until offered sweet milk. But the pattern remained. The old river stone formation carried mana beneath all 12 platforms. Somewhere below Platform 7, a damaged section released pressure in tiny bursts. Standard instruments averaged the flow and reported stability. Cowries reacted to the brief changes in possibility around each burst. A student casting at the wrong instant would experience sudden resistance. Water spells suffered most because they followed the hidden river current. Hunter charms triggered late. Sunspear magic compensated through raw projection, which was probably why the Academy's most prestigious students rarely noticed. In my first life, I had mistaken that resistance for proof that I needed more force. I had forced harder until my channels tore. The realization left me sitting very still. Nsia lowered herself beside me. You could not have known, she said. I should have listened to my body. You were 18. So am I. She gave me a quiet look, not entirely. Kojo sat on my other side and handed me a sesame cake he had clearly intended to eat himself. It was the kindest sacrifice he knew how to make. We searched the old library records the next morning. Beneath dust and a stack of obsolete cafeteria budgets, we found the original foundation plan. The Riverstone network had been installed 83 years earlier. It was designed to balance mana between platforms during large examinations. A note in the margin mentioned a maintenance cycle every 12 years. The last recorded foundation inspection had been 14 years ago. The visible runes were renewed, Nsia said, but not the stones underneath. Kojo traced the network with one finger. Can we repair them? Not properly, I said. That requires opening the floor. The public challenge was 8 days away. The Academy would never dismantle its main courtyard, on the word of 3 first-year students, and a bag of shells. Madame Badu studied my notes. "Then do not ask them to believe the shells," she said. "What should we ask them to believe?" "The results." Our chance came during the challenge rehearsal. All first-year tracks gathered in the main courtyard, while instructors tested the shared formation. The public challenge was an old Akir tradition. Mixed groups would move mana through 12 platforms to awaken a carved river tree at the center. Each field had a role. River students guided the current. Hunters struck moving anchor targets. Formation students maintained the visible runes. Healers balanced participants' mana. Sun Spear students lit the final crown of golden leaves. Cowrie students recorded timing and stood out of the way. Master Aboje assigned our class a table near the refreshment tent. "Write down any delays," he told us. "Accurate records are useful." Madame Badu smiled pleasantly. "We are deeply honored to be trusted with writing." I had learned that her pleasant voice was often a warning. Nsia's name appeared on platform 7. Of course it did. Kojo had been assigned to platform 9. Ya Osai stood at the central platform with the Sun Spear group, his golden robes bright even under the cloudy sky. When he noticed me arranging cowries on our table, he walked over. "I heard you have been testing the courtyard at night," he said. The courtyard complained about the attention. He glanced at my 36 shells. "Do you truly believe those can measure a formation better than academy instruments?" "No." He looked surprised. "They measure something different." Ya folded his arms. "The public challenge is not a market journey. Hundreds of guests will attend. The academy should rely on proven magic. Cowrie reading has been practiced longer than Sun Spear magic." "Yes, by traders and aunties." "Traders dislike losing money, and aunties dislike being wrong. Both are strong pressures for accuracy." Kojo, passing behind him, made a choking sound that might have been laughter. Ya did not insult me. He simply shook his head. "If you interrupt the rehearsal without proof, you could cost your class its place in the challenge." There was the pressure. Cowrie study already had only 8 students. If we embarrassed the academy publicly, Master Abojai could remove us from active participation. Madame Badu left the decision to me. That frightened me more than if she had ordered me to stop. The rehearsal began. Mana flowed into the platforms. My shells shifted after 13 breaths. I marked the time. Another pulse came 39 breaths later. Nsia's water current shivered. No one else noticed. At 78 breaths, Kojo's target charm activated late. He adjusted and hit it anyway. Ya's Sun Spear group sent golden mana upward. The formation stabilized. Master Aboje smiled. The rehearsal ended without failure. Ya looked toward me as if expecting an apology. Instead, I showed him my notes. The pulse weakened when your group increased projection. Then the formation is stable under full load. No, your magic is covering the fault. If the result is successful, what difference does that make? Because the public challenge will begin in stages. Platform 7 will activate before the Sun Spear group. His expression changed slightly. The final event order had been posted that morning. For 42 breaths, the river students would carry the entire formation without support from the central crown. That was exactly when the strongest pulse would occur. We presented our evidence to Master Abojai. He read the maintenance record, listened to Nsia's account, and examined my 6 pages of timing measurements. Then he looked at the Cowries. "You understand my difficulty," he said. "You do not trust divination." "I do not trust any method I cannot reproduce with academy instruments." "We can reproduce it tomorrow." "The public challenge is tomorrow." "Then the timing is convenient." He did not find that funny. The academy could not cancel the event based on an unverified possibility. Guests had traveled for days. Merchants had built festival stalls. Families had filled the dormitories and guest houses. But Master Abojai gave us one concession. We could monitor the formation from the side. If visible instability appeared, we could call for a pause. Visible instability happens after the probability shift, I said. That is the standard I can authorize. It was not enough. Yet it was more than we had been given in my first life. That night, the Cowrie class gathered in room 12 beneath the leaking roof. We arranged 36 shells around a chalk copy of the Foundation network. Different Cowries responded at different speeds. If placed over the 12 platform nodes, they could act as small resonant buffers, absorbing the first instant of a mana shift and turning it into motion. They would not repair the cracked stone, but they could show us the pulse as it moved. Nsia could then redirect the pressure. Kojo could strike the anchor targets at the correct intervals. The formation students could reinforce the visible runes. Even Ya's group could help if he listened. We will have perhaps 2 breaths, I said. Kojo nodded. 2 is plenty. Nsia looked pale. I reached across the chalk lines and took her hand. You do not have to prove that you deserved your first score, I said. You only have to cast the way you already know how. She breathed in slowly. Then she nodded. Rain began tapping against the windows. For once, none of the buckets overflowed. I decided to consider that a favorable sign. By noon the next day, the academy courtyard was full. Families crowded beneath bright cloth canopies. Market sellers offered spiced tea, bean cakes, carved charms, and miniature wooden sun spears. Children leaned over the viewing rails until ward attendants gently pushed them back. The 12 exam platforms shone around the carved river tree. I stood beside the Cowrie table, wearing the plain gray sash of the academy's least respected magical field. Madame Badu had polished her bracelets. That was how I knew she expected trouble. The challenge began with formation students awakening the outer ring. Green lines spread between the platforms. Hunter track students struck the first anchor targets. Kojo hit all 3, adjusting his timing by ear. The audience applauded. River students stepped forward. Nsia stood on platform 7. I arranged 12 Cowries on the velvet mat. The remaining 24 waited in small numbered pouches beside me. Master Aboje raised his flag. Water rose from 12 basins. The carved channels around the courtyard filled with shining blue currents. 13 breaths. The pale blue Cowrie trembled. I lifted one hand. No visible instability. The examiners continued. 39 breaths. 3 shells turned. The river tree's stone roots began to glow. Nsia's shoulders tightened, but her spell remained steady. 77 breaths. The chipped Cowrie tipped toward platform 7. 78. All 12 shells snapped onto their backs. Pause, I shouted. Master Aboje looked toward the platforms. Nothing appeared wrong. Then the formation struck. A sharp blue pulse ran beneath the courtyard floor. Platform 7 flashed. Nsia's water ribbon buckled. 2 other river students cried out as their spells twisted sideways. The carved channels overflowed, sending bright water across the stone. Master Aboje lifted the red halt flag. But Nsia did not release her spell. She lowered one hand and sent a thin stream directly into the seam beside the northern node. The water vanished. A crack beneath the platform lit blue-white. The audience went silent. There, she said, loud enough for the carrying charm to catch her voice. The Foundation current is leaking. Formation instructors rushed forward. The next pulse was already building. I took the first numbered pouch and threw 3 Cowries toward platform 7's edge. They landed around the northern node. The shells spun. Not randomly. They turned in sequence as the hidden pressure moved beneath them. North line, I called. Kojo fired an anchor arrow into the nearest target. The impact redirected mana toward platform 8. A second row of Cowries began spinning. East line 2 breaths. Another hunter struck. The formation students finally understood what they were seeing. The shells are mapping the surge, one of them said. Reinforce where they turn. Silver runes brightened around the moving pattern. The mana pulse reached platform 9, weakened, and returned toward the center. Ya's Sunspear group stood ready beside the river tree. Do not cast at full force, I told him. He hesitated. In my first life, I would have hated him for that hesitation. In this one, I understood it. He had trained to solve problems with power. I was asking him to trust 36 old shells and a girl everyone had laughed at. How much? He asked. 3/10 projection on my count. He lowered his spear. The other Sun students followed. The Cowries around the central platform leaned inward. Now, Ya released a narrow golden beam. Not the grand pillar the audience expected. A precise thread of sun mana entered the river tree and met Nsia's redirected current. Gold spread through the blue water. The hidden pressure softened. For 6 breaths, the formation held. Then another crack opened beneath platform 5. The audience gasped. The examiners began moving students toward the exits. We can stop, Nsia called. I looked at the shells. The pulse was no longer chaotic. It had a path. The old Riverstone network was trying to balance itself, but the cracked northern section forced each correction into the next platform. If we guided the pressure around the entire circle and released it through the central tree, the formation could complete its cycle safely. We can finish, I said. Master Abojai stared at me. Are you certain? No. That was the truth. Cowrie magic did not give certainty. It gave choices. But this path is stable enough. Madame Badu stepped beside him. Director, she said, certainty is a luxury usually claimed by people who have not noticed the danger yet. He looked at Nsia. At Cove. At the formation students waiting for instructions. At Ya, whose sun's spear remained steady at reduced power. Then Master Abojai lowered the halt flag. Continue under Cowrie class timing. For the first time in Academy history, the entire trial waited for our weakest field. I cast all 36 shells. The pattern opened across the velvet mat like a white river. Platform 5, reinforce. Silver runes rose. Hunters, third targets. Arrows struck together. River group, reduce flow by 1/4. Nsia relayed the instruction. The current softened. Sun group 2/10, hold, now release. Gold entered blue. The carved river tree awakened one branch at a time. Not with the explosive flash the Academy had planned. It glowed slowly. Roots first, then trunk, then 12 branches carrying blue and gold mana together. At the crown, 9 stone leaves opened and released a gentle rain of warm light over the courtyard. The audience remained silent for one breath. Then the entire Academy erupted in applause. Nsia stood on platform 7, soaked to the knees, staring at the glowing tree. Kojo lowered his bow and laughed. Ya looked at the Cowries, still turning on my mat. None of us had one alone. That was the best part. The Academy closed the trial courtyard for 6 weeks. When formation masons lifted platform 7, they found a crack running through 3 foundation stones. The damage was old, narrow, and almost impossible to detect while the formation was inactive. The official report described the problem as an intermittent probability stage mana imbalance. That was a very expensive way of saying the Cowries had noticed first. Nsia's midterm score was voided. So were 11 other failed results from the previous 4 years. Students who had been transferred because of those scores received formal letters and new assessment opportunities. Nsia completed her replacement practical on platform 2. She scored 87. She still trembled before she began, but this time she looked toward Kojo and me, took one slow breath, and raised 3 perfect ribbons of water. Kojo's instructor stopped calling him unlucky. After reviewing his timing notes, the hunter department discovered that Kojo could hear changes in active enchantments before most students saw them. He was assigned to advanced moving target work. He pretended this was expected. We allowed him to pretend. Ya visited room 12 3 days after the challenge. The roof was still leaking. He stood beside a bucket and watched Madame Badu teach us how to compare travel routes using 8-shell patterns. When the lesson ended, he approached my desk. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You listened when it mattered." I almost did not. "But you did." He looked at my cowries. "Could probability reading improve sun spear timing?" "Yes." "How much?" "I do not know." He seemed surprised again. I had discovered that prestigious students found honest uncertainty more disturbing than insults. "We could test it," I added. Ya began joining our evening practices once a week. He was terrible at casting cowries. His shells regularly predicted events that had already happened. Madame Badu said this was still more useful than many official reports. Master Aboje offered the Cowrie class a larger room in the West Tower. Madame Badu refused because the windows received poor morning light. We received a repaired roof instead, along with new shelves, proper practice tables, and a small research grant. The academy also added a Cowrie observer to every large practical examination. They called the position a probability safety reader. Madame Badu called it market worrying with a salary. My own reward was quieter. The pain I remembered in my hands never returned, because I never forced sun mana through channels that hated it. Cowrie work strengthened my control slowly. 4-shell readings became 8-shell lattices. 8 became 12. I learned to sense how each possibility pressed against nearby mana. I could not see the future. That was never what the shells offered. I could see when a spell was beginning to lean toward failure. I could notice when a safe path narrowed. I could feel the brief moment when a frightened friend might succeed if someone reminded her to breathe. Those were small powers by academy standards. Small powers had changed 3 lives. On the first clear evening after the courtyard reopened, Nsia, Kojo, Ya, Madame Badu, and I carried food to the river steps below the 7 Bells Market. We shared ginger tea, roasted plantain, bread, and a small cake Kojo claimed he had purchased for everyone. He ate half of it. The academy's river tree glowed in the distance, its repaired formation sending blue light through the grounds. Nsia rested her head against my shoulder. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you chose sun spear magic?" she asked. I looked down at my hands. In another life, they had shaken constantly. Now they were steady around a warm cup. "Yes," I said, "but I do not miss it." Kojo tossed a crumb toward the water. A tiny river spirit surfaced, caught it, and disappeared. Madame Badu frowned. "That may be the spoon thief." "It has a respectable career now," Ya said. "Market worrying." Even Madame Badu laughed. Later, beneath the warm lamps of room 12, I opened my notebook to a clean page. I wrote the date. I recorded Nsia's score, Kojo's new training assignment, the repaired foundation cycle, and the first successful cooperative Sun River probability pattern. Then I placed the pale blue Cowrie beside the ink bottle. It leaned gently toward the window. A moment later, the evening rain began. In my first life, I had tried to overpower fate with a golden spear. In my second, I learned that fate usually whispered before it moved, and sometimes the only person listening was a girl with a handful of shells.